X is an almost complete refresh from the original Ally. Everything is different, with the exception of the AMD Z1 Extreme chip and the 7-inch 1080p 120Hz display. But does it feel any different? So same CPU and GPU, but a 50% increase in the amount of RAM and at a faster speed, which is going to affect performance, which we will talk about in just a second. You get double the battery life with a massive increase from 40 watt hours to 80 watt hours, which is the headlining feature of this refresh, and a much faster charging speed. Although you only get a 65 watt power cable in the box, so if you want those full speeds, you'll need to buy a faster brick from a third party. So let's just jump directly into some real world performance here. Destiny 2 is one of the best examples on why someone might want to choose the Ally over something like the Steam Deck, considering Bungie outright banned it from the handheld, at least if you're running the pre-installed Steam OS. And for all its faults, this is still my most played game. The latest expansion, The Final Shape, released not that long ago, was very well received, and playing it is a fantastic experience on this handheld. I'm running it at the native resolution using the default settings that the game chose for me, and it looks great, it's running great, with the frame rate sitting in the mid-50s in most scenarios. And that VRR is smoothing it out, so if I wasn't actually looking at the counter, I would think that it was running at a solid 60 and rarely hitting performance dips. So this is by far my favorite game to play on the device, and it's even more viable now that I'm getting just over 2 hours of gameplay at these same settings and using the turbo profile. That's over twice as long as I was getting from the original Ally. So this next game actually kind of took me by surprise, Ghost of Tsushima. I'm not sure why I was surprised. I haven't had any real performance issues with this game in the past, but I guess it was just crazy to me just how good it looks and performs using the performance profile. So that profile feeds the GPU 17 watts on the X. I have it set to the high preset at 1080p, which is using FSR quality upscaling, and I turned frame generation off here because I just want to see how it performed without the artificial frames. I'm pretty consistently getting over 30 frames per second here. I did get dips into the mid-20s, so I dropped it to medium settings, which still looks really good, and it's a lot more stable. Now turning frame generation on, I'm getting between 50 to 60 frames per second here, and I got 3 hours of playtime when testing the battery. So with this much larger battery, I also decided to use this opportunity to get a bit further in Persona 5 Royal. So for this one, I actually set it to the silent profile, which is 13 watts. Frame rates vary quite a bit at this profile using a combination of medium and high settings, which is what the game defaulted to. Indoors, I was seeing upwards of 120 frames per second, but when walking in the streets of Shibuya or other outside cities, the frame rate was jumping anywhere between 39 to 60 frames per second. The VRR was helping significantly here, but with those larger jumps, the dips are definitely more noticeable. They're smoothed out, but they're still noticeable. And because I just wanted to see how far I could get on a full battery, and there was so much variability anyways, I decided to cap it at 60 frames. Now, I would say that my experience playing this was really good. I enjoyed my nearly 4 hours of playtime at these settings, but this is probably one that I'd bump up to the performance preset in the future. Now, usually I'd play a game like this on my Steam Deck OLED, and as much as I love that OLED screen, I might actually prefer the sharpness of the 1080p screen here over it. Now, most people probably wouldn't mind the lower resolution of the Steam Deck, but it's something that I definitely feel when switching between the two. Now, 2D games like Hades 2 is probably a better candidate for that lower TDP, and unsurprisingly, it runs fantastic here. I'm getting basically a locked 120 frames per second at that silent profile. Okay, so how does this performance actually compare to the original Ally? Now, because they have that larger battery, they also increase the TDP on the two lowest profiles. So on silent mode, it goes from 10 to 13 watts, and the performance mode goes from 15 to 17 watts. Now, I could always do a more apples to apples comparison between the two by setting up a custom TDP on this one to match the two lower profiles on the original Ally, but I just kind of feel like most people are going to pick this up and use those profiles as they were already set up. Now, there is an increase in performance here. I ran the in-game benchmarks, and I was seeing anywhere between 10 to 15% of an increase in performance, but as far as the actual gaming experience goes, it honestly kind of just feels the same between the original Ally and the Ally X. It's a nice little bump, but really, it's hard to even notice when you're actually playing a game. So if you're considering buying this, I really wouldn't do it for that small increase in performance, but I would probably do it for the huge increase in the battery life. Asus, I believe, is just trying to strike that right balance between thermals, noise levels, performance, and battery life. And I'm feeling like with the 17 watt performance mode, that's really the sweet spot here. Getting nearly 3 hours of battery life while playing a fairly demanding game like Ghost of Tsushima is impressive, and then reserving turbo mode for those on-the-need bases. At least that's how I feel like I'll be using it. Unless I'm plugged in, then I'm gonna go full 30 watts on any game that's even mildly demanding because, why not? One reason why I wouldn't do that before was because of the fan noise at that profile. On the original Ally, the fan noise is, it's not bad considering the small fans in there, but I could still hear a slightly high-pitched noise that would drive me a little crazy. Now, the new one is significantly less annoying. There is some fan noise, of course, but it's not nearly as high-pitched as the original Ally, and I honestly don't even notice it most of the time. Now, as far as the heat on the device itself goes, it basically doesn't get hot anywhere on it, at least not on the outside. The original Ally, it would get a little hot to the touch on the top vents, whereas on this new one, it's just slightly warm air. So they redesigned the thermal system with larger air intakes, a third exhaust vent, and bigger heat pipes, along with a redesigned fan. So all of that is off to a very promising start. No issues or noticeable heat on the device, even after hours of nonstop use. So the ports are mostly the same, with the most notable change being that second USB-C port that replaced the previous XG mobile port. And they moved the SD card slot. So no idea if that's gonna fix the issue with the SD card slots we've seen in the original. Mine has not died, but it's way too early to tell. I think replacing the XG mobile port with a USB 4 is a good move overall, but I imagine if you invested a lot of money into one of those expensive XG mobile external GPUs, then you probably won't be all that happy with this change. But I think for most people, it opens up a lot more eGPU options, which can give you a nice boost in performance if you need it, and also serve as a docking station, assuming that you buy one with the necessary ports. Now, with that larger battery, you would probably expect it to weigh more, and yeah, it does. I don't care what ASUS says. It definitely weighs more. It's the first thing that I noticed when I took it out of the box, was how much more it weighs and how much thicker it is. Now, to be clear, I'm not complaining though, like not in the slightest. I kind of like how much more it weighs. It feels more premium for some reason. I don't know how to explain it. And having that little bit of extra thickness, I think it feels good. I think it feels a little bit better. It's not as thick or heavy as the Legion Go, but it's definitely more than the Steam Deck and the original Ally. Now, I could understand some people not liking that, but for me, I don't mind that increase in weight, and it hardly feels like a compromise in my opinion when you get significantly better battery life. They changed the grips to a curved design rather than this kind of cutoff that they previously had. It feels almost exactly the same to me. The only difference is that I notice my hand sits a little bit higher on the old design, and I think I find the older design to be a little bit more comfortable. The joysticks are noticeably tighter with a little bit more grip on the top. I am very happy about this change. I prefer more tension here, and I would say that that's probably the biggest weakness for me with the original Ally's controller. I always felt like the joysticks on the original one were just a little bit too loose. ASUS also claims that they will also last 2.5 times longer, but I don't know, only time will tell there. Buttons feel tighter and more raised as well. The original had a looser, plasticky sound to them, whereas these new ones have a deeper and a much more solid sound and press. There's also some texture on the D-pad now instead of it being smooth all the way through. And I am one of those people who always use the back buttons, especially if I'm playing a game like Destiny 2. On the original, my middle fingers rested directly on them, and because I use them so much, I found that really comfortable. In the new one, they're moved out and they're significantly smaller. I have to reach a bit to hit them, and if you are someone who doesn't use them, you'll probably be happy with the new position. But if you're someone like me who uses them all the time, you might not like it. I personally don't like the new position. Upgradability has also improved here. You can now use a standard size 2280M.2 drive. So these are much easier to come by, and they're generally less expensive, and there are frequently more deals on them. And you can actually get one up to 8 terabytes to fit in here. It's also supposed to be easier to replace the thumbsticks. I of course have not had the opportunity to do that, so I can't vouch. And I mean, look, all of these changes are amounting to what I think is probably the best Windows handheld that you can buy right now. But that's kind of also the problem, right? Windows is a little bit of a pain in the ass to operate on such a tiny display. See, ASUS is trying to make things as streamlined as possible with the Armored Crate, but once you're outside of that software, which you will need to do in order to update Windows or numerous other system level things, that stuff can be pretty frustrating to navigate with the really small text and touch targets. And if you're willing to deal with all of the annoyances that come with Windows on a handheld, then you're kind of getting the best of both worlds here. You're getting the battery life that you could expect from a Steam Deck OLED, but without all the limitations that come with SteamOS. And so if you're wondering if this is worth an upgrade from the original Ally to the Ally X, it really depends on your use case, right? And I know it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but it's the truth, right? Because if you're somebody who plays their Ally in bed or on the couch and always has access to an outlet, then you're probably not gonna see, really any benefits to getting the new one. It's definitely not worth it. Don't waste your money. But if you're somebody who travels a lot with it, I really feel like that increase in battery life takes this Ally from being something that I probably wouldn't have brought with me on a trip over, a Steam Deck or even a Nintendo Switch. And now it actually makes it a viable portable device, something that I would actually pack and take with me. But anyways, let me know what you guys think about in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.